So first of all, I thought I'd, in typical fashion, just give a bit of an agenda of what we're going to be covering today. This workshop and that is not going to be only me talking to you about experience, etc. It's also for yourselves to interact, and it's quite nice sometimes when you have a smaller group, but definitely to use the chat. And since there's just a few of us for now, is voicing your opinions, etc. as well in terms of this. So first of all, my name is Nushagan. So I have two heads on, basically. I work as one of the co-founders and on the leadership team for Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing, which is a non-for-profit community interest company. So this means that we're not designed to make any profits or anything. We're there to grow the community and ensure that it's sustainable. We bring together health and wellbeing leads, people who are and have a keen interest in developing their wellbeing strategies, etc., to come together to learn and share from best practice. So we tend to be a lot more focused on that. We have fantastic support across the board with over 150 wellbeing leads from some really key companies that come together. Wellbeing and that agenda for wellbeing can be quite lonely when you are appointed as the wellbeing lead in terms of that for an organization. I knew that, and I'll go on to tell you a little bit more about myself and my background and why I'm able to speak to this topic. The other part of my life as well is I head up the position of people and projects for a tech company. So that in part helps me quite a lot, because within there, of course, there's a well-being agenda, which I drive. And often, more than likely, you see what it's like being actually in an environment where you are still trying to take care of your consumer, your customer, but also your team. And what are those driving factors when we think of productivity, when we're thinking to get the team, and especially in the tech world where you've got the added kind of intersectionality or the added layer of people being neurodiverse. The worst thing you could do to a group of people like that is do something that's a forced fun activity where they've got to really be out there in a 2-hour workshop or something. It doesn't always work. So these are the kind of things that I've always got to think about when I think about well-being. In terms of my background, career-wise, I started out, I moved over from Sweden, and I worked for the company that you would possibly know, which is IKEA, or IKEA, whichever way you like to say it. And I started off my journey within internal comms and marketing. And the reason being, our theme a lot of at IKEA was all around how do you make people's days better, how do you improve. So the well-being theme was always in there, and then subsequently moved into the head of health and well-being for the UK and Ireland, which is where all of my experience, etc., has come from. I also then entered the market doing well-being strategies for different sizes of organizations and speak on the topic in terms of that. And within that scope, have worked for startups in terms of a strategist for them, and also defining where wellbeing is going. I sit on the Global Wellness Institute. I sit on Business for Health in terms of associate really contributing to where the trends are and what's up and coming when we talk about wellbeing, because it is so broad and there is much to do. So I don't think you get the badge of working with wellbeing because it's fascinating, but it's not the place that I would say is the easiest to work in, because you're constantly challenged. But I guess that's what drives me quite a lot. So as I said, we're going to go through a bit about defining what well-being means to your business. And I think it's not just my definition, it's also how do you define it, why well-being makes commercial sense. There are some obvious things, but also how well-being then impacts communities and how do we look at it from a wider scale. I've left some time at the end just to do a bit of Q&A as well, because the purpose of these sessions and how we're working is really we'd like to get more people engaged, ask questions, because as I said, it's not that everyone has the holy grail of well-being. I work with some phenomenal well-being leads, but nobody has cracked every single nut. It's a work in progress. There is no one size fits all. There is no one solution. There are a number of things that are working, and people are working simultaneously on different things. So I think that's something to bear in mind. I think often we can give ourselves a really hard time if we are leaders in organizations, if we think we're not doing as much. But the purpose of also this session and sessions we will be running is sometimes to take a pause. I'm not here to tell you what the great wellbeing strategy is. I can do that at a later stage if that's what you needed. But it's also to look at where we are right now. And where we are right now is all about, it's really tough on budgets. We can be very time poor. I think for the most, a lot of organizations really want to try and do the best they can for their people. But there are strains and stresses that we know business go through. So we have to understand it's not about, I'm going to go and put in the greatest app, or I'm going to put in the solution. It's actually, where are you today? And where do you want to be? And what resources can you actually get, which you're not paying as much for, and what support and mechanisms are in place already. So some of the resources from Richmond Council, there are some resources there, and it's to reach out and have this kind of co-creation of what do you need, so we can actually fill in some of those gaps. And especially with an organization like Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing, there's a plethora of people that are there that are able to support as well on this guided journey. So without a further ado, I'm going to move on to just, and as I said, it's a small group, use your chat, or whether you are more comfortable typing in. It's more to be able to get your thoughts on, or how do you define, what does well-being mean to your business today? And there's no right or wrong, there's no judgment, there's absolutely nothing, there's no tests or anything. I can assure you, when I started as a well-being lead, people look to you for the solution to all the problems for 11,500 co-workers. And you kind of went, stop, pause, let's reassess, let me go through all of the data, let me go through everything. But actually define it for our organization. What do we want to be known for? What does it mean to us? And I'll be able to share some thoughts, but I'd like to get some of you to share some of your thoughts. So please use the chat, or if anyone wants to go ahead and let me know, just put your hand up, use yeah. Francis, I'm just going to pick on you, because earlier on you were giving a bit of where you are at. Did you want to, what would you say are your thoughts or your definition of what well-being means to your business today?
For the business, I'm not sure. For the people who work for us, I think because of the type of work we do, we want them to feel fulfilled, and to be able to feel comfortable in what they're doing as well. I think that's important. So their well-being is their mental, but also their physical well-being, I think.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I think I've got something in the chat. So Suzanne, good one. People being content and healthy. Anyone else want to have a go? Julie? Ben?
Yeah, for me, I think it's about, staff being healthy, happy, and salaries aren't great in this sector. So for me, it's about making our well-being offer as best as it can be, and taking opportunities as to how to make work for them, and to help try and balance their life and make that easier based on what our well-being offer can be.
No, that's really good. Some really good insight there. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that before I kind of move on to a bit of a definition, because some really good keywords there. I mean, thank you for that and the contribution, because I think that's basically where we're leading towards, and it's important, I think, to understand what it is that you wanting to define it as. So this is a very, I guess, long-winded, but it basically encompasses everything that we all are trying to say. So well-being is an ethos and a commitment to creating a healthier, happier, and a more productive workforce, community, and world. And as we go through this kind of workshop and interaction, and that, it's really key words there. It's no longer just about our workforce, because if you think of individuals within your organizations, they don't come just as their own. They come as part of a family unit. Even if someone is on their own, they come with some form of connection. So be it to a family or be it to some form of community. And then when we look at the wider agenda in terms of the world, when we talk about the world, the reason why I like that context is because if we think, and we'll come to it, is that it's no longer just about employees, it's about your business, and it's about this wider community, which, you know, impacts all of us. So really it is up to leaders within organizations to focus on empowering and creating the conditions for employees to thrive and be well personally, professionally, physically, and financially. So many of the words that you have used, it's just been in the sentence. So unfortunately, we still have the debate regarding, does well-being really make a difference? And the answer is absolutely yes. We know the link towards productivity, etc. So we will be covering a little bit more and going into a lot more depth on that. So this is where I want to just launch a poll around, just to gauge, I guess, what do you think well-being should include today? So I'm going to launch the poll as soon as I can get it up, and please do let me know. So I'm going to launch this first question we have for you. So what do you think well-being includes today? So, and remember this, I'm not saying that this is the end all, and if you don't have these, you know, there's nothing. This is just a couple of questions we're going to ask over the next kind of period of time. So please feel free. Can you see the poll now? Yes? Yeah, okay. So these are just some of the examples some people have explored, and yeah. And there's absolutely no right or wrong. This is some of these things I've pulled out just purely because that's been the general consensus that people are using today. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And as I said, there's no trick question, but what's interesting for me, and I'm going to share the results of this question, is what we can all agree is employee support networks. So I'm going to come to that because I think that's really crucial. You know, often people see and view well-being as, you know, I've got to invest all this money, etc. But sometimes it's simple that does the most effective. Is sometimes, are you just asking people where are their pain points? Where do they need support? And, you know, when people are part of a wider agenda, a more purposeful agenda, they tend to feel a sense of belonging. And with that, I think employee support networks are one of those things that really we should be considering. I think quite an interesting one coming next, and I think it's two things there, is around the living wage employer. I think that's really important, especially where we are today with the cost of living crisis. A lot of employers, we are trying to go into, it's around fair pay. And I think that's where we see a lot of the conversations happening, just purely because of the cost of living crisis and all the issues we're facing. I think another thing where I think it should include, and today, and it's the pressures we have with the NHS, is around the clinical support. Is how do you access, you know, through your organization or have access, or is there some way that you can get that support, especially when it's occupational health? We know with doctors, sometimes it's really difficult to find a doctor, etc. So how can organizations, and I think, Julie, like you pointed out, you know, how do people, you know, if we're not getting it in terms of pay, what does the well-being offering look like? Because that's, again, something that a lot of people are looking at, is how attractive is it? And the talent that's out there today is very much looking at that. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to go on to my next question, I guess, which is around just gauging, do you use any early intervention methods to reduce absence today? Is there anything that you're thinking? And I've just kept it as yes or no. And by the way, I don't know who's answering what. Yeah, we can't see anything. So yes, majority of people, yep. So I'm going to end the poll and just share it. So this is it, is if anything, there's really good that there's already this momentum in place, that there's early intervention methods to reduce absence. I think if there isn't, some of the recommendations here that we're going to be speaking about, and this is all relates back to why there's a commerciality point on well-being, because we know if we are trying to aim to reduce absence, that's an impact on the bottom line. Whether you can see it or not, a lot of organizations for a long time didn't actually measure or see the impact. I know from my experience, when I joined, headed up health and well-being, one of the first things I looked at is really around absence and how much money were we actually losing in terms of absence. So I think it's quite good that this is something that you are looking at and there's some intervention. And again, towards the end and with questions and everything, if there isn't, this is the part where, you know, what is out there, what possibly could we be looking at as early interventions. You know, just go on to the next one, which is the final one. So just launch that one. So do you think you've created, or do you think there's an environment where staff feel comfortable coming forward with wellbeing issues? So good. This is quite vital, because once people have answered this, it's one of the things that I think is so vital. You know, as I said, a lot of the time people are looking for quick solutions. It's all about, oh, what app or what thing can I add in that's going to make things better? But actually, it starts off, how do we create trust, and how do we create that safe psychological environment where people feel comfortable to come forward with wellbeing issues? Because when you can identify, you can then put in early intervention methods rather than someone getting towards the end, and then it becomes a much longer process, which then has a commercial implication. Because of course, when someone is off sick for a longer period of time, it does cost the business. So I'm going to end that poll and share results. So what you can see is, it's reassuring that there is this move towards creating an environment where staff feel comfortable coming forward with wellbeing issues, because I think that is really the key at this stage. It's not about, as I said, these big budgets all the time. It is also about, where do you start? And it really starts with this employee support networks. It starts with having the conversations, asking people what they need, where they are, and how can you put in the right in kind of initiatives that actually prevent them from going off sick. Because the chances are people don't really want to go off sick if they tend to get to that last resort when it's really, they are at their last. I'm going to cover a few of the things that, you know, I've considered and looked into in what wellbeing should include today. We talk about income and wealth. We talk about the living wage. We talk about fair pay. This is all around, when you look at wellbeing strategies, they'll talk about the financial, physical, social, and mental. But I like to categorize it out to bring it all into, I guess, these kind of headings. So it's that income and wealth. You know, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if anybody has done some reading on that, you know, in order to get your self-actualization, where you feel content with yourself, where you feel purpose, you have to go through the other stages. And one of them is that I have enough shelter and food and warmth, etc. So the drivers for income and wealth are there. We can see that today. So that's quite important. Work and job quality. So perhaps you've come across the fact that, yes, job design is quite important nowadays. We're seeing more young people who are the talent of tomorrow, or, you know, to retain and recruit that kind of talent, they're very quickly going, what are the work conditions? What does it mean? Is there a form of job design around the job that I'm doing? Or is it just very 8:30 and then you finish at 5 o'clock, but it doesn't take into account how people's work schedules are, or how they work, or what they need to do to be their best at work? We talk about housing, and together with housing, it's, you know, is it safe? Do I have what I need in terms of housing? Health is a very big topic at the moment. I was at a session yesterday for the Covenant of Health, which brought together, I guess, a collaborative approach across the three main parties, the, you know, Conservatives, Labour and Liberal Democrats, to actually talk about the state of health in the UK at the moment and the position that the NHS are in. And health is a big driver at the moment, because, of course, the strain not only on the NHS, but actually when we look over the next 5 or 10 years, if we don't do something right now around things like smoking, obesity, children's health and well-being, especially when it comes to mental health and physical health, even obesity, if we don't do something around the cardiovascular issues that are going on and people coming into hospitals. If we don't get people active and moving, these are the kind of elements that we look at health. So, if you look at, no matter whether you're a small organization or whether you're a large organization, if I give you the examples of a small organization like the one right now, I've got a team of 10 developers. They sit all the time. Sometimes they don't take proper breaks. They're eating at their desks, etc. And those are the kind of things that I'm trying to influence to move away from. Getting those proper breaks. I need you to move, doing a walk and talk, organizing that. Even just doing a walk around, the office is something better than them just sitting. But also then being quite strict around their timings, as in, okay, because clients sometimes will be, well, they just accessible all the time. Well, no, actually, their day has finished at this time. Absolutely, I can help you tomorrow. However, this is what it is. So that we don't have issues like burnout coming along, which is a big problem in the sector I work in now. If I looked at the major problems I had within IKEA, it was a lot around musculoskeletal, for instance. You picking up heavy packages, you on the shop floor, you're walking around a lot. So do they have the right shoes? Do they, are they trained enough to how to lift and everything? So these are the small things you need to consider for your team. Are they taking a proper break in their day? If they are care workers, for instance, that are traveling between different, patients, for example, is there a respite period in between that? Is there, if they are in a hospital, we are challenging some of the status quo in terms of, do people have somewhere where they can at least take a break? Because there's a heavy load of what they're doing at the moment. We talk about knowledge and skills. I always talk about the tools to do my job. Am I upskilling? Do I feel like there's a career movement here? Do I feel like you are investing in me growing? I think that's really important. I'll come back to subjective well-being and civil engagement. Environment quality, we talk about air quality. That's another thing associated to health. There's big pressure around that and what can be done. And then we talk about social connections. We learned post-pandemic and even during the pandemic just how crucial it is when people are feeling lonely and the impact to their mental health and their physical well-being. So social connection is so vital for us because we are social beings. Even with the people that go, I don't do people, I can assure you, you still miss the social connections. We talk about work-life balance, which is also where you see burnout coming a lot through. And then associated to a lot of this overarching is, this absence conversation, presenteeism, absence, how that's all interlinked is we have, and people are chasing more of a work-life balance. And I think the pandemic did a lot of things that really impacted us, and that was quite negative. But I'd like to think that the well-being conversations have gone much more further in terms of that. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to ask a question whether many people know what subjective well-being is and what civil engagement is. Use the chat or anything? No, that's fine. It's all about learning and new things. Don't worry, I never quite understood. It's all different things and I'll definitely explain. So subjective well-being is defined as a kind of a person's cognitive and affective evaluation of his or her life. In general terms, it's your satisfaction with life. How happy are you? So it's your happiness. And that is really driven by many factors. But often when we look at health and well-being, we talk very shallowly. We talk about connection, we talk about physical, we talk about the mental, we talk about that. But also underlying, more and more conversations have to be asked emotionally, how are you? In terms of the relationship, how satisfied are you with your life? Because then it impacts your work. If you have someone coming in that dissatisfied with life, you can usually tell, someone walks in, their shoulders are really stooped, they don't feel like they're satisfied in life, they haven't found their purpose. So this is all around subjective well-being, is looking into emotions, moods and feelings. And this is where it's also about empowering managers and educating ourselves in understanding that impact of emotion on your performance. And all this overarching is, it all has a piece to play. Because of course, if people are not in the right mood or the right emotional state or feelings, it affects their work and their productivity. So really, this is it. It's all talking about whether it's the effect of subjective well-being is whether you have negative emotions or whether you have positive emotions. You also will see it sometimes coming through, especially when you are taking, say, for example, a difficult conversation, or when someone returns to work. They may get defensive. We often talk about the kind of they go into like a childish behavior. It's that child within them, because they've got all these different kind of levels. But in the simpler terms, it's the higher your subjective well-being, the happier you are. The lower it is, the less likely you are happy with your life. So it's to do with purpose. And then when we look at civic engagement, it's that participation in community. And this is why well-being extends not just in terms of your employees, it's extending out. We actually gain purpose. We actually, when you participate in these community activities, either volunteering or getting involved in community dialogue, in problem solving, decision making. And when we say this civic engagement, it can be actually in your employee networks. For example, you may have a network for, women who are going through the menopause, or a diversity group that, have an upcoming, event coming on. We've got the LGBTQ plus movement, things like that. So these kind of activities, and, even things like organizing a local cleanup, or doing a park run, or, anything that involves that allows you to feel part of a community. So this is why we talk about civil engagement. And when we talk from a well-being perspective, it's also important to how do we add that into people's, I guess, well-being journey as well, because this allows it. I mean, I've been on a local cleanup, and actually, you have a good laugh. Okay, you do complain around how much litter there is in your area, because you see it much more when you're doing one of those, but actually it just gives you a pause to see and appreciate different things. So these are the kind of things. I'm not saying that everything is absolutely as it should here from a well-being perspective. Different people will call things very differently, but these are the kind of things. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about safety, because there's not just a movement on safety in terms of the physical safety. Am I physically safe at work? It's also about psychological safety. So there's a big factor in terms of psychological safety. There's the latest ISO 45003 that talks about it. But in terms of that, this is where it's the movement in well-being. If you look at where it was 5 years ago, if you just look at it pre-COVID time, it has moved quite a lot. The other thing, of course, is nobody expects anyone to have all of these cracked. That's what I'm trying to also emphasize here. We've got some organizations that are at a very high level. If I look at IKEA, can I say they've got all of those absolutely knuckled down? No, absolutely not. It's biting off what you can chew at a certain point and what you think you can put into place. It can be one or two things, starting to have those conversations, identifying people's moods, organizing something that doesn't need a whole full budget. And this is what we're really trying to emphasize. It's not about your budget. It's about the resource that's available out there that you can do quite a lot with. And with a bit of creativity, you can actually improve workplace well-being. It's just how innovative you want to be with it, rather than going out for the latest, I guess, jumping on the bandwagon, which tends to happen quite a bit at the moment. So coming towards, but before I go into a bit more detail, are there any questions in terms of going back to what does well-being include? Is there anything that you would add to that? Or do you think it's quite a thorough list, things to consider, or do you think there's more that could be added? And I know it's not said like directly around mental health, but mental health would fall under like subjective well-being. But also it's around the psychological safety, which falls under safety, work-life balance. So I always look at mental health as an overarching. If I think of financial well-being, if you don't have enough money or you are low on your funds, probability is it will impact your sleep, it will impact your mental health. We know that's happening to a lot of people and will affect your physical health as well. So is there anything else that anyone thinks that they could add to it that we've missed? No? Okay. No, I'll move on. So I think, not to kind of go over too much. I think the commerciality of well-being now has extended. And when we talk about health and well-being, we know that when we invest in our people, you know, the quality of the human and social interactions, it's really important not only to the individual, but it also impacts society. And when it impacts society, we know that, you know, it can benefit productivity, it can benefit companies' performance. So it's very true of employees and consumers, as well as the community. But we know healthy and happier co-workers or workers are more productive and contribute to the overall organization's performance. If I rattle off some figures, we know in terms of what the cost of sickness to the UK economy, if we look at 2022, it was in the range of £15 billion. So you can see that, I mean, it's a huge figure, but if you just downscale it to just one business, you know, it's more and far extends. You know, if one person is off sick, you not only have to find a replacement, it causes more stress, there's more strain. And then also often, if you don't know where that individual will be coming back or returning, it's how do you fill that position? So often it's that whole recruitment process or finding the right person and the handovers, etc. And often we don't put a figure to that because we just do it. But actually, when you look at just a recruitment process and the money spent in hours, that gives you a clear indication of what it is. Unfortunately, the UK has been put as the worst health, having the worst health in Europe, which is putting a huge strain on the NHS. So when we talk about wellbeing in its commercial sense, we see it from a wider, the impact to the economy when people are off sick. Just alone in 2022, again, we're looking at 185 million days, working days that were lost to sickness and injury. So this is where, if I give you an example of safety, how safe are your people in the workplace? Because those accidents that do happen not only impact the working days for your organization, but from a wider perspective as well. We know mental health is a big topic at the moment. And again, it was a primary conversation in yesterday's, I guess, MPs got together and spoke about the covenant of health. And again, mental health came through. It is costing the UK economy at least 118 billion pounds a year. So we know we've got to do something there. Where you see the commercial sense also long term is when we look at young people. At the moment, if we don't invest and do the right things for young people and children from a mental health perspective, especially with the added layer of the level of neurodiversity we are now identifying in young people in terms of ADHD, etc. This all means there's an impact long term, because this is the workforce that we need to pull through. They are the talent for tomorrow. And we know we've got an aging population, so more people are living longer. So in terms of that, we need economically to sustain it. So we are seeing this interlinkage between economic production, societal well-being, and then sustainability, because the link is, if you feel well, if people feel well and happy, they will treat one another with respect, and they'll treat the environment with respect. So it's a lot of these things that come together. What I have also looked at is, how does well-being and this commercial sense line up to what the councils are doing at the moment? So in particular, the London Borough of Richmond upon Thames are focused on kind of three priorities: the greener borough, a safer borough, and a fairer borough. So you can also see that from that perspective, it's all around coming back to well-being. And because we rely so much on our communities and our businesses to take part of that lead, and you know, there is pressure on government, hence why I'm saying there are those conversations. They have to lead by example. We have to put more pressure on the larger established private sector as well to support wellbeing initiatives for the economy as well. You know, things like less sugar, or less adverts around gambling, or less adverts around alcohol or vaping, etc. These are all things that there's that connectivity between this well-being, because none of us can do it on our own. So it's quite important to look in terms of that. But coming back to where the government's I guess focus is, as I said, they are looking at it from a health perspective because of the pressure on the NHS, but also from a community perspective, they know they can't do it themselves. There has to be this bottom down, but also bottom up. So organizations, people, communities are really essential to be able to deliver this. But if you look at a lot of the corporate plans for councils, and I've looked at Richmond upon Thames, it is about how do we create more green spaces, because when we create green spaces, and there's that green agenda of community activity, you know, bringing that civil engagement into it, we can grow communities. We can go back to that, you know, that sense of belonging into a community and making our communities much nicer, but also greener spaces where people can actually get active, because we know there's a connectivity to that, not just for your mental health, but also your physical well-being. We know safety is top of mind. You know, you want places where you feel safe in, and then also in terms of a fairer borough as well is something where there is a bit of more of a focus on than there was. We will be sharing a lot of this information as well. You'll be getting this recording as well on the website, etc. I don't want to hang too much on the actual kind of image that I've put in the infographic, but where it is just to show you a bit of a cycle, and it's, you know, open to use, is just how this connectivity works between looking at the economic productivity, the societal well-being, and then of course sustainability. We no longer, as business people, whether you are you know, offering a service or a product, can we think that we're in isolation? Whatever we do impacts our employees, it impacts our consumers, it impacts our suppliers, it impacts our communities. So when you look at well-being, I think you know, I don't know whether Frances is still on here, but if we think of the work that she does, is that a lot of her people are working outside. They are going into the community and doing quite a lot. You know, so they are offering a service, but also at the same time, how do they take care of their own well-being? Because they're doing a lot in terms of the community. So this is the impact that we all have. Our business is not just creating capital in terms of money and investment and everything. There is, and you know, as it says, to meet the demands of the stakeholders, but it's also that it impacts society and the environment, financial performance. And it's all about the short-term value, but also the long-term value. So what's good for society is good for the planet and is good for the business. So really, it's about that. There's also this attachment as well. You'll see, if I went and said a certain brand name, you know, something would pop up to mind. And nowadays, there's more and more that you will be negative towards a brand if you find out they've, I don't know, got a sweatshop in Vietnam, for example. You will have a negative. These are the kind of things we're saying, is that the work that we're all doing today needs to consider the impact to the environment and the impact to our communities and to our employees, because employee well-being, it's well-being as a whole is not just sitting only in terms of your business and your employees. It has a far reach in terms of even brand performance and how you treat your employees, how you treat your consumers, your customers, and the community is quite vital. So in terms of that, that's the model that I thought was quite a good image when we talk about the stakeholder well-being, impact on society and the environment, the sustainability element, and also financial performance. And these are the kind of things that I guess when you're thinking of well-being as well, is not to just think of, you know, whatever impact you do to well-being within your organization has a much further reach than perhaps even you believe it has. And this is important to also consider. And again, as I said, as we've been going through, it's not just about the budgets. It is about what can you organize, because as I said, I gave the example of looking at, you know, how you create a community garden, for example, or how do you get out and do a volunteer day or things like that, because that's not just only well-being for the individuals and your employees, but also has an impact on the communities. But also, you know, when you share that and people know that you're doing something like that, your consumers and your customers actually feel better about it, because they're like, okay, you know, they are taking care of the well-being of their people, but also taking care of the well-being within a community. So I'm going to pause there because I want to open up some more kind of question time and some dialogue here, because I feel like, yeah, I've spoken quite a lot. And I know there's only just a few people, and we didn't really want to go over time because we know people are busy, so we left some time at the end. There's only, I've no more slides. The only slide I have is around the useful links, which would help. There's the Richmond government website. If you hadn't signed up to this on there, it's on there. The Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing, where you can check out the different wellbeing leads we have there and get in touch and see if that's somewhere where you'd like some community activity. If you'd like to link in with me and ask me questions, or pass something through me, absolutely do that. If you're interested in some reading and where the direction is going for the government in terms of the covenant for health actions needed for a healthier England, there's that as well. And then I would highly recommend the Good Work Standard as a good guide for you if you're trying to think in terms of what do I need to be thinking of, where should I put my focuses. It's got a really good kind of framework if you think of aligning to what Richmond Council are looking at, what we all are looking at the moment, around this, how do we create fair pay, investing and looking at what does the living wage look like if you do have employees that are on minimum wage, what does that mean? But it's got a good framework to work from and a guidance. We also are running another session on mental health specifically. This one was more generic and have a more conversation. We'll be digging a little bit more deeper into mental health and getting, some more kind of insights and ideas, etc., on mental health and where that is going and the kind of various things. You might have heard things like the government are looking at how they're going to make mental health first aiders, as part of a big initiative that, businesses, especially large businesses, need to invest, like how you have a first aider, a physical first aider, how do you have a mental health first aider? But there's lots of debate around that because, of course, what does that position mean? And, not all disabilities are visible or not all illnesses are visible. So how do you then take that conversation? So those kind of things are coming through. So we'll be discussing a little bit of that. So that's on the 26th of September as well. And you'll get it through the newsletter. It's on the website. It will be put up. And then further to that, we're going to be doing a session on financial well-being, where we'll bring over a financial well-being specialist. I've had experience in that. It's one of the things I worked on in IKEA as well, because I had identified very quickly we're not taught financial well-being at school, and a lot of employees, a lot of young people. I mean, I've encountered a lot of people that don't even understand their pension or how much they need in their pension, all of these kind of things of the questions we need, and it comes back to guidance and education. So that's from me in terms of that. I just wanted to open it up and see if there were any questions that anybody had. If you feel that you don't want to ask the questions while it's recorded, please do say that as well, and I can stop recording. Any question? Oh, this comment in the chat. Yeah, thank you, Kirsty, for the comment. Yeah, thanks so much for the session. Really interesting ideas about workplace wellbeing through community work. Something I'll definitely take away. I'm glad that's really good. And then can I pass over to you, Nadal, just to explain what you've put into the...
Yeah, sorry, I was going to type it into the chat. I've put in a link to a form for evaluations, just a few questions. It shouldn't take you very long. I'd really appreciate if you'd fill it out, and it's anonymous as well. So unless you put in your email, your contact details at the end, otherwise it is an anonymous response. But thank you, Naz, for going through all of that. And it is such a broad subject when it comes to well-being, but it's so valuable and so important because it has so many connections to so many different elements of the society that we live in. How you showed in your infographic, it's not just about the employee themselves, but it will have a ripple effect on the way that they work within the communities that they're in, and also their families. So if a staff member as well, they're going to go home and they're going to be well for their family as well, which impacts. And so it's such a wide impact that it can have, and it's so important, not only for the business themselves, but the communities, which will then of course invest back into the business as well, or third sector, whatever the employer organization is. So thanks, Naz, for going through that with us.
No, thank you. Julie, question?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. It was a really good refresher. I've worked really hard on our health and well-being, and I'm reviewing it again this year to try and push it that little bit more as well. I think, you know, it's such an expensive borough to live in for staff, and it's and we work frontline services, so you know it's a challenging job, as I think the other attendees would say. So you know, you want the best for your staff, and you want, I think the biggest challenge is, and I think what takes such a long time for us is the and you know, I obviously have help and assistance from our board and our treasurer just around the HMR implications, and I think you're right, it is a big investment, and it would be great, I guess, as time goes forward, if we saw some maybe local corporate organisations invest, especially in frontline workers within the borough. I think there's a lot of work that could be done in terms of those investments. You know, we've got 6 race courses surrounding the borough. We've got, you know, the rugby ground stuck in the middle of the borough, and I think in terms of investing in staff, I think, you know, as time goes on, you know, our staff, we are committed to London living salary, but you know, if we've got a lot of single parents, we've got, you know, retired, we've got, you know, people that aren't married, and if you're living and working on one salary, it's quite a challenge. So I think that financial element, and that, you know, like you say, the work life and mental equilibrium and all of those are no more important than they've ever been, I think, at the moment. So, you know, it's supporting our staff, and you know what the local environment can offer and invest, I guess. Not only in the voluntary sector, but I think for the workforce generally, and especially those on a low income bracket.
Yeah, I think, Julie, you make a very good point, and I think this is where I talk about the, you know, organizations and how do we engage with large organizations to give back. You know, before people used to talk about your corporate social responsibility budgets, or it's now your ESG budget. So equally as much as those conversations are coming through, is trying to convince, especially those big brands, that doing good for the community and supporting low income families in a certain area. So for example, if you're talking about you've got 6 race courses and a rugby, well, could they put on something, you know, that gets people moving, or some community activity, and how do you engage? And I think Nadal and the team are looking at that. How do you engage with local businesses? Because this has to be done as a community. So yeah, I think you make some very good points there, and I think it's something to take away and have a thought about. I do think long term, in what I'm seeing, and I don't, when I say long term, I'm hoping it's not going to take us forever to get there. I'm definitely seeing more that the brand element is coming through. So those race courses and the rugby, they need to be giving back, whether it's youth, supporting youth mental health and physical well-being, but they need to start somewhere. So very, very good point there. Anything else from anyone else? As I said, my details are there. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. You know, if you feel you want to get involved in Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing, we run some separate strategy sessions. You know, if you needing to, it's always good about community. It's all about, if you're a wellbeing leader and you're needing that support or learning more, absolutely reach out, and we can absolutely support. And as I said, thank you, a big thank you to Nadal and the team for initiating these conversations, because we need this dialogue to happen so we can actually see how we take directions in different ways. Anything else from anyone else? Otherwise, I'm sure you'll gain your 4 minutes from now to get a cup of tea before you have to rush to your next meeting.
I think you spoke to me about this before. I'm just doing the form, the accredited, the local health.
Yeah.
You know what? Yeah. Can we do that?
Yeah, because I was also going to say that if you need a framework to work towards, because you mentioned, Julie, that you're sort of refreshing your action plan.
Yeah.
It's a really good, it's kind of like, you've got a set of criteria, which are evidence-based, backed by evidence, and you can look at them and say,
Yeah.
yes, we meet this, or actually we don't really meet this one. What can we do to meet this one? And at the end of it, you get an accreditation, so you can be, which is always lovely to have. So definitely.
Absolutely, really lovely to have. And I'll relook at that. So do you do that independently, Nadell?
So we do that locally. So the accreditation, it's done. I mean, we at Public Health support you through the criteria, and then the accreditation goes to an external provider, and you get your accreditation from the borough. So it's awarded by the borough.
Yeah, lovely. I'll link in again about that. It just prompted me. I remembered it was on a to-do list somewhere. So I'll pop it back on. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Thanks. And anyone else, you can contact